everybody, and welcome to the Fortress Comic News, episode 74. I am one of your hosts, Chris, alongside a special guest host, Mr. Travis Holyfield.
Hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having.
So anyone doesn't know,
suitably excited.
So anyone doesn't know, we have the ongoing joke that Mike is off on international business. So he is busy and couldn't be with us. So Travis was nice enough to jump in and do the show with us. So
it's what I can do, doing my part for our government and the CIA. Oh shit! Did I just blow Mike's cover? My bad. My bad. Mike is not in the CIA, guys. He is not out on a top secret mission or anything like that at all. Not at all.
He almost gave it away. He's going to be gone on June 12th too. So he definitely won't be in North Korea. So I'll do a quick bit of keeping, whatever it is. And you all know, check out the youtube.com/sportscomic news. We got great videos up. We just did a new comic book reading club, as well as tomorrow, when you're going to listen to this on Monday, so tomorrow will be Tuesday, and the top 5 new comics of the week will be out, so make sure to check all that stuff out. And Travis, we got some cool news to talk about, so let's jump right into it.
Let's do this.
So it looks like with the next season of The Walking Dead, Andrew Lincoln's going to be leaving the show at the end of it. And Norman Reedus just signed a big contract, so he's going to be taking the lead of the show. Are you still watching Walking Dead?
You know, it's a yes and no. It's a yes and no. I pieced out of the last season at the mid-season mark because I realized I wasn't having a lot of fun with it. And I kept up with it via news and just keeping my finger on the pulse and whatnot. So I'm up to date with what's been happening, and I'll probably go back and binge through the whole last season. I've actually been enjoying this season of Fear the Walking Dead way more than I thought I should. So I kind of was like, oh, I'll just check out of the TV show for right now. But apparently there's an itch I have that must be scratched by one of these shows. And I got to tell you, I'm really intrigued by how do they do this show without Andrew Lincoln. I don't know how to feel about having it be the Daryl show. I like Daryl. Everybody likes Daryl, but Daryl's also a character that maybe should have gotten blown up, a while back. I think it's interesting, though, because it does give them the opportunity to do storylines that have not even been touched in the comic and maybe break away from where the comic's at. I think one of the big problems with the show recently has been this need to sort of adhere to stuff that happens in the comics, even when it defies the logic of what's happening in the show. So I'm going to drop some Walking Dead spoilers for you. So if you're not caught up with Walking Dead, just jump ahead 5 minutes in this this recording. All right. So I feel like the decision to kill off Carl was a huge mistake for the show. It befuddles me that that's a decision that they made from a storytelling standpoint. I don't feel like it gains them anything at the end of the day. And I feel like the stronger show would be Rick dies, Carl leads, and then seeing how that works. That's a story I'm interested in, is watching how does somebody who's essentially grown up in this world carry forward, and do they still have the same sensibilities? Do they still have the same sentimentality towards the old world? That's a story I'd really be interested in seeing. I don't know that Daryl has that much story that hasn't been told. You know what I mean? Carl evolving into his own, becoming a leader, taking over Rick's place, and then kind of finding his own way in the world, especially because, at least in the comics, they did some really interesting stuff with him and Negan and him and Rick, and kind of balancing those two. That's an interesting story. But what are you going to say about Daryl that has not already been said? So, again, if I'm doing it at this point, if you're telling me, hey, Andrew Lincoln is bailing out, you should have been doubling down on, and I'm going to forget the actress's, Lauren Cohen. You should have been doubling down on Lauren Cohen a while ago and not dicking her around when it came time to pay her, because they're going to be phasing Maggie out too. And that's a huge mistake, because Maggie's another character who's arguably more interesting to follow than Daryl. So I have my worries about where the show is going to go now. I'm intrigued to see what happens, but it's kind of like when Richie leaves Happy Days and the show just becomes about Fonzie. You know, Fonzie's good and all, but there's going to come a point where Daryl's going to jump a shark on that fucking motorcycle of his, a zombie shark. And I think we might be dangerously close to that point.
I kind of want to see that now. Well, we talked about
zombie shark would be rad. I'm not going to lie, but I would tune. I'm going to roll my eyes real hard at it, but I would tune in for zombie shark.
It was in one of my girlfriend was watching one of the Pirates of the Caribbean, and there was a zombie shark in that movie. But we talked about
that's a model you want to replicate, is doing stuff that the Pirates of the Caribbean movies have done. Those movies have absolutely been flawless and have stuck the landing all the way through.
We talked about the Carl death nonstop. Like, they overdid it. They went way too far with it. Like, it lasted for it felt like 5 episodes. And I agree, it was a mistake.
Need to, because if you're going to do something as unexpectedly stupid as that with a character that has been around since day one, again, you know, give that character, I get that, like, give that character his room to kind of leave and say his goodbyes and everything like that. I mean, they did something very similar in the comic not too long ago. If you're not caught up with the Walking Dead comic, skip ahead 5 minutes in the recording. With Andrea's death. When they lose Andrea, they spend a whole issue really saying goodbye to Andrea. And is it the most like zombie realistic thing in this universe? Probably not. But is it something necessary both for the fans and especially on the show for the actors? I think it is. And I think there's something to be said from like taking a moment and being sentimental on a show that has played really fast and loose with the audience's affection and the characters' deaths. To their credit, thank God they didn't do the thing that they did with Glenn, where they do a fake out and then kill him off a handful of issues later to keep, to keep in sync with the comics. That was another gigantic storytelling misstep. I'm going to say that I'm not sad to see Scott Gimple go as showrunner, as immediate showrunner. And I think that we'll probably see at least, if not a stronger, then a more interesting season 9, based on the fact that he's not directly involved in the day-to-day show decisions. Yeah. And a couple quick things. Like, I always thought that the comic was going to turn into the Carl comic. Like, it felt like they've been setting him up so your whole idea there, like, I feel like the comic has to get there sooner or later. I think that's always been the plan. That's what it's looked like to everybody, watching. And
then with Daryl, I felt like back in, I think it was season 7 when they first introduced Negan, and they were teasing the whole death sequence. And we all knew it was going to be Glenn because we read the comics and we knew they weren't going to stray too far. But I felt from day one they had to kill Daryl there. I feel like you really need to hate Negan, and everybody loves Daryl. You want to hate Negan, kill off the favorite.
It should have been Daryl instead of Glenn. Really is what it should have been. Now, don't get me wrong. I think what they did with Daryl in that sequence was some of the most interesting stuff that's happened to Daryl for a while. Like the him and all the stuff with him and Dwight has been very interesting to me as a viewer and as somebody who has both read the comic and watched the show. So, again, they had some story to tell with them there, but I'm just saying at this point, Daryl as leader, the only silver lining I can take from it is that that probably means we'll get some good stuff with Carol out of it, and she is arguably one of the most fascinating characters to watch on that show since the very beginning. The stuff they've done with her, the arc. Melissa McBride is, I believe, the name of the actress. This is what happens when I don't have IMDb in front of me, which I do very constantly. She's amazing in that role. So if it means a little bit more screen time for her, I'm into it. But I love Daryl. He's a fun character. Norman Reedus is a heck of a lot of fun to watch. But do we really need to anchor the show around him more than we already do? I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with Negan next season too.
Indeed.
So sticking with AMC, are you watching Preacher?
I haven't been, and I think I need to get on it because I checked out the first episode and I just wasn't feeling it. And I've got so much other crap that I watch and so much other media that I digest. I was just like, all right, I'm going to piece out of this and, maybe catch it later in a binge. And a lot of people whose opinion I really respect, who love the comic as much as I do, really are enjoying the show. So I got to jump back in on it. And I saw I don't think trailer was quite the right word, because it was just kind of a pullback with all the characters that they've got lined up for season 3. But the Angelville story is one of my favorite Preacher stories, and it looks like they're going to do that justice, man. That looks really fun and really interesting. So I'm maybe jumping in.
Yeah. So they released a teaser trailer for season 3, and it went through. It was basically like most teaser trailers, a bunch of cuts of random stuff to make you think one thing's going to happen, something else going to happen, this and that. But the basic idea is, we're going to see the storyline you just talked about. I really enjoyed Preacher so far. So has Mike, and we're down for season 3. We're in this kind of lull where we don't have Flash, we don't have Walking Dead, so we're waiting for Preacher to come out. And they hit last season one of my favorite storylines, and that was the whole great grandson of Jesus Christ and the company around him and everything. So from there, it's just like, to me, they did that so well that I can't wait to see where they go next with that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'd love to see them get all the way to like the Meat Man storyline. Let's just see how they pull that off on a TV show.
Well, they've been teasing him for about 2 seasons now. They've kind of showed him and talked about him, but they haven't really done the storyline yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's one of those shows, too, where the first half of the first season it takes a while, but once it catches its footing, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. It's a show to me that it suffers from the same thing that the American Gods show, I think, which is on Starz, did, which is just it's source material that I'm deeply in love with. Like, it's stuff that a book that I really love, that really means a lot to me, that I have a lot of kind of in my head how it should look, how it should work. So, when you get in there and it's not exactly like that, it's no fault of the show at all, but you just have to be like, all right, I can either get on board for their vision, or I can realize it's not what I was expecting and just kind of back out. And that's what I did with Preacher, but it seems like it's worth watching. So it's on the bubble. It's definitely in there.
Yeah, with all these shows, I take it as Earth 2.
Oh yeah, you gotta.
Yeah. So moving over to movie news, Todd McFarlane's been talking about the Spawn movie he's making, this indie Spawn movie, and he finally cast his lead for it, and it's gonna be Jamie Foxx.
Yeah. How do you feel about this?
I don't know how I feel about it, because in all honesty, I'm not a huge Spawn fan. Like, Spawn was one of those characters that looked cool, and I remember the movie when I was younger and enjoyed it, but it's never really grabbed me.
Let me ask you, when was the last time you actually read a Spawn comic? Because for me, it's been like 20 years. And it's one of those comics that when you tell me like, oh yeah, they're still making Spawn, my jaw drops. I'm like, really?
I think it's been a couple years, but I think the reason I went back was because I checked out some of the Capullo Spawn. And I also wanted to look up, who was the Angel? Was it just Angel that came over from Spawn to Marvel?
Yep, Angela, that's what it was. When Angela came, I wanted to check out her origin too, and it's just, I don't know, it's not for me. Let's put it right
at
on. Yep. No, I'm there with you. I guess so. I'm pretty much in the same place that you are. I don't have a strong opinion on it. I don't really know what to think. Spawn is not necessarily my cup of tea, and Jamie Foxx is, he's a guy I enjoy in movies, but he's also not somebody that I queue up specifically to see. Like, I've never in my life been like, oh shit, Jamie Foxx is in this, we're going opening weekend. Like, I've never done that. I like Jamie Foxx, but he's just not that guy that puts my particular butt in a seat. So I don't know how it works. I do know that I have seen people get really excited about this news. And there's some folks I know who I think are genuinely really stoked for this. So more power to them, and I hope it really plays off. My biggest question or concern is Jamie Foxx does not strike me as the guy who wants to be put under 5 hours of prosthetics every day. A la like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool. And the big problem with a superhero flick is that they've got full face masks. So you start to run into the problem that like the Raimi Spider-Man movies had, where you've taken this dude's mask off every 10 minutes because it's a full face mask, and you've paid for this big name and, let's just say, big face actor to be in that role. How do you put a guy like Jamie Foxx in the role of somebody who at best has a face that looks like, a bag full of dried up assholes, and at worst is basically a very cool mask, but not one that you're going to look at and be like, oh yeah, it's Jamie Foxx under there. Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool gets by in personality, so Ryan Reynolds essentially is Deadpool. I'm not sure how Jamie Foxx's on-screen presence translates into Spawn quite that tightly. So that's my only reservation about it. Like, how are they going to pull this off? But, hey, I hope they do, and I hope they stick the landing, and I hope they make everybody who is really into Spawn and, conversely really into Jamie Foxx, hope to make them really happy. So, Godspeed.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those movies I'll check out when it comes out. I gotta know. Like
in theaters, you're gonna queue up for that, show up in the theater.
Oh yeah, and I mean for multiple reasons. One, because my interest is piqued, and two, because we do this YouTube channel, so I gotta talk about it.
Oh yeah.
But at the end of the day, even if I wasn't, I would probably wait till second or third week and then check it out, because it's Spawn. I remember Spawn. I remember the cartoon from when I was in high school, and I remember the movie from when I was a little bit younger, and so there is a connection. I do enjoy the character somewhat. It's just the comics never really grabbed me, and it's not someone who I want a big statue of behind me, So
as I check out everything you've got behind you up on the walls. No Spawn.
It's unfortunate because Squirrel Girl's covered right now, but it's fine.
Oh, that's a drag.
Yeah. So, everybody, we're going to cut right now to a interview I did. I talked to Cavan Scott from, he's done a ton of shit, but we're going to cut to that real quick, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Hey, everybody, Chris here. Quick interruption of the podcast. Please, if you have any comic needs, any of the books that we talk about today you want to pick up, you have any supplies you need to pick up, go to the link down below in the description of this video and or podcast audio feed, and click on my link for mycomicshop.com. Great service. They deliver everything straight to your home. Weekly auctions. They have all the supplies you need, all the weekly books you want, all great stuff. And if you use my link below, you show them that you care about everything we do here at Forge Comic News. So please, if you need anything, remember to click on my link down below. And on to the interview, everybody. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. Today I have a very special guest, writer for so many different properties, but the one that got me into got him into my viewpoint was Star Wars. We have Mr. Cavan Scott on the show today. How's it going, Kevin?
It's going well, yeah. Thanks for having me here.
So, I first was introduced into your work because of the Star Wars Adventures in Wild Space book series. Because when they announced that they were doing a whole new canon, I went nuts and bought pretty much everything. That was a kind of not an all ages, but a young reader's novel series. Yeah. And then going back and looking, you've done so much. You've done Doctor Who. You're doing Warhammer right now, and all of that. I would say, is there a specific property that really holds your interest the most, or?
Well, for me, it all started with being a Doctor Who fan and a Star Wars fan back in the 70s. So the fact that I'm working on both of those is still amazing. I mean, I always say that my to-do list now is pretty much what it was when I was 10, which isn't a bad way to be, I think. But yeah, I mean, Who has always been a part of my life. And in the same, I think I started watching it around the same time I saw the Star Wars films as well, the late 70s, early 80s. So they're mixed up in my mind, especially as for both of them, for Star Wars, I read the comic before I saw the film. We used to have the Marvel comics, Marvel UK over here reprinted them every week. We had something called Star Wars Weekly, which reprinted the old issues. And I read those before I saw Empire in the theatres. And similarly, Marvel UK also did Doctor Who comics as well around the same time. So both properties are very much comic-based properties in my mind, because again, Doctor Who at the time, when it was on telly, that was great. When it wasn't, all we had was the comics, really, and the books to keep us going. So, yeah, the fact that I've worked on Doctor Who comics, I'm working on Star Wars comics, that's quite special for me now, because especially with a lot of the Star Wars stuff I'm doing being all ages, it means that I'm writing for the kids exactly the same age as I was when I first picked up, the those stories filled with Jackson and all the madness of the early Marvel stories, and that's continuity. So yeah, I think those two are still the franchises that I've worked on that are the ones that mean the most to me.
So you mentioned that a lot of stuff you're doing is all ages. Was that something you really wanted to do when you got into this career, or was that something you were kind of, your career went that way?
I think it was a bit of both, really. I'd worked, before I became a full-time writer, I worked in magazines for years, and I edited a lot of kids' mags, especially sort of Disney mags and things like that. So I'd always worked in that area, among other things. So some opportunities came about when I was just starting out as a freelancer to work on the Skylanders game that came out 10 or so years ago, and you had the little figures that you put on the console, and they came to life in the game. And so I wrote comics and books based on that. And I think in the end, I ended up writing like 20 books based on Skylanders because it just went mad. Everyone went crazy for it. And so that sort of set me on a path. But to be honest, I'm not, it's nothing I've been worried about, because I like writing stories for kids. Or actually, I like writing stories that families can enjoy together. I mean, I've written a lot of stuff that isn't kid-friendly in my time. And it's always good to do that as well. I don't think part of what I love about my job is that I can be writing one thing one day and something else the next. But there is a certain excitement in writing for kids that you don't get from adults, but you when you're writing for fandoms, you quite often get fandoms that will embrace, all ages stuff. But the response you get back from kids, especially when you do events for them and you go into schools, they don't have any filters, they don't have any agendas, they just love what they love. And so you get that thing when you go stand in front of a group of kids and talk about Star Wars, just the love that comes back at you, and the excitement and the energy is amazing. So yeah, I think whatever I do, I hope I'm always going to be writing something that kids will be able to pick up as well.
Well, that's something I love too, is someone who's recently, I've been with my girlfriend about 2 years now, and when I jumped in that relationship, it came with 2 kids who I grew to fall in love with just as much. And those kids just love everything Marvel, DC, and Star Wars. Yeah. And I remember for the longest time, it was so hard to find stuff that they could read. Yeah. And Star Wars Adventures was one, that's the comic you're now working on IDW, that I really loved being able to show them, because it was the Star Wars stuff that they love, and they could actually get into it. Whereas opposed to if I try to give them a Batman comic, it's a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I have to say I've got 2 daughters, 9 and 12. And my youngest actually quite likes Batman. And there was one day when I saw her picking up, that period in time when the Joker had shaved his own face off. Yeah. I saw her reach him for my trade of that arc, and I did a proper no going over the lounge. But yeah, I mean, things like DC has actually got a great thing with Batman, that you can pick up things pretty much for every age. There's going to be something out there. And so yeah, for that I could pull out the DVDs of the animated series and go, here, watch this. That's fine. You're safe. But that was definitely the thinking for Star Wars Adventures when IDW got the license to do that, because there's all the brilliant issues and series that Marvel are putting out for Star Wars, but not all of them are. Some of them are all ages, but not all of them you'd want to put in front of a small child. But yes, it was just that case of making sure they had adventures that they could read by themselves and also with adults. And we're seeing over the last couple of years, it's like the comic industry has remembered that there are kids. And you're starting seeing more and more coming out, and it seems to be a real movement at the minute, which is brilliant, because you go to conventions and you've got families turning up to sign together. And as a dad who loves comics, who's got 2 daughters who are developing a love of comics as well, it's brilliant that there's loads of stuff I can now push to them and say, look, here's the stuff you like, but I can feel safe leaving them with it. And as I said, there's been with the stuff that DC's now doing, I picked up. There's lots of things with adventures in their title now. There's the Marvel superhero adventures that have just started from Marvel with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And yeah, it's great to see that again, because when I was a kid, you just pretty much picked up anything, and just read it. I don't think you can necessarily do that anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that book because we actually had Jim McCann, the writer for that, on the show last week.
Yeah.
He was a good guy too. So let's talk about Star Wars Adventures a little bit. So Star Wars Adventures, they're these one-shot stories set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Kid-friendly. What's the model for that? Are you given free roam to say, do whatever character you want to do, or do they have a set plan for that book?
They had a plan when we first started talking about it, because I came onto it because I'd done the Adventures in Wild Space series you mentioned, a junior novels. I was working on a couple of other things, and I'd just done a Star Trek short for IDW for Star Trek Waypoint. And so my name sort of filtered through. And what originally happened is that we were given a long list of potential issues and which characters were going to be in which issue. And we sort of a load of us pitched, because it's a book where we have got a revolving team of creators. So, you've got lots of issues going on at the same time. So there was a definite plan, that it was always going to be a Rey story for issue 1 and 2. Then there was going to be a Finn story. Then there was going to be a Luke and Leia. Obviously these things change and as time goes by, but yeah, there's a conversation now between IDW, the writers, and Lucasfilm about which characters should go where. Now obviously at the minute it seemed there was no other choice to have Lando and Han stories the last couple of months because of the Solo film, and where you'll see, if you follow Star Wars Adventures, that things will link in to whatever else is happening in the Star Wars universe. There was a Delilah Dawson wrote a Rose story when Last Jedi came out, for example. So there is, there's all one big plan. Mike Seglain at Lucasfilm, who's the publishing director, he's just got this. I don't even want to imagine what his spreadsheet's like, but he's got all these books and all these comics and everything working together. For years to come, and so he knows exactly what he wants when he wants it. But there's still quite a lot of freedom to work within that as well. So you're told this issue is going to be this character, but within that, then it's up to them for the creators to pitch various stories, and for every issue you pitch sort of 3 or 4 stories, which go off to Mike, which go off to IDW, which go off to Story Group at Lucasfilm. And then the feedback comes back. So there, and again, it's not that prohibitive when the feedback comes back. They're very good at encouraging you to push the story how you want to push it as the writer as well, and the artist. So it really is it's a team effort for all the Star Wars stuff I've been working on. So while there is a set plan, there's still quite a lot of freedom within that plan.
And you mentioned the original Marvel comic series. So that brings me to, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in your run you brought back Jackson the Green Rabbit.
Did. Yes.
Was that something that was on that spreadsheet that they were like, hey, this character's available, or did...
I don't think it was on the spreadsheet originally, but I think everyone was talking about, can we do Jackson? And I think it was was it in New York or San Diego Comic Con last year? I'd been mentioning it to Mike, and I know Mike had been talking to the editors at IDW, and I never believed that in a million years that they'd let me bring Jackson back. Because, yeah, as I said, I started reading those comics before I saw Empire. I was really upset Jackson wasn't in Empire Strikes Back. There's probably quite a lot of fans who were quite happy about this, but for me as an 8-9-year-old, I was devastated. So yeah, it was something I talked about, but I didn't really think it would happen. And then an email arrived with the subject line Jackson, and I had to. And it's one of those moments actually when your email doesn't load properly, so you've just got the subject line and a little swirling ball underneath. And I was like, they were either going to tell me I've mentioned Jackson one too many times and I'm never working on Star Wars again, or this is happening. And yeah, and they opened up, and it was Bobby, the editor of IDW, of Star Wars Adventures at IDW, saying, do you want to do this then? Do you want to bring back Jackson? Because we've got a story coming up that's around Easter, so it seems right to have a story about a big bunny. What would you want to do with him? And again, I sent off a few ideas, and it turned into the Eggs of Laverno, which I still can't believe's happened. It was quite a tough job in the end, because I put myself under a load of pressure to get it right, and do something that was in keeping with what we've been doing, but also felt like Jackson. and I knew it would have a lot of interest. I think some of the guys at IDW were slightly surprised about how much people were talking about it. Yeah, but I loved every minute, and getting the art back from Morissette and seeing the rabbit's foot after 30 years of it not being drawn was amazing. And all I had was that they were asked, bring Jackson back. They didn't say bring his ship back. They didn't say bring a Mazer back. It was just do a story that could be, was a typical Jackson story. And I put in like Han and Leia in there, thinking they're never going to let me have him meeting the big guys. Oh, no, they're in. And there's a lot of love for Jackson at Lucasfilm. And so I've now got to be careful that I don't pitch him in everything I do, because there have been a couple of things that I've slipped in, and we can have Jackson here. And at some points they've gone yes, and most points they've gone no, don't be silly. But there's at least one thing I've written recently that I've mentioned him in. So he's out there. And of course, just around the same time he appeared in, a Leppy who looks very much like Jackson appeared in one of the Forces of Destiny cartoons as well. So, yeah, there's a bit of a movement. Jackson definitely lives. I think that's the thing to take away from that.
Yeah, and you're doing great work on bringing him back, because that was one I might be a little bit younger than you, because I grew up, saw the movies, and then later in life was introduced to the old comic book series, and I remember coming away with just loving that character.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much fun as well. I mean, because the original gags they put in, there's loads of Looney Tune gags in the original strips. So I just carried on with that. So he's now got a droid called Mel now, for Mel Blanc, and the Laverno are the breed of what's the rooster in Looney Tunes?
Man.
Foghorn Leghorn.
Yes,
he's a Laverno, so that's why it's the eggs of Laverno. And so and Queen Prissy is named after Miss Prissy from the Foghorn Leghorn. So I was having loads of fun getting all that in. Again, there were points when they looked at me and said, "Really, come on, rein it in." But you've got to try in these moments. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing we keep saying with adventures. It is supposed to be fun. Star Wars is there. It's the franchise that's supposed to bring out the 12-year-old in all of us. And yeah, it doesn't mean we can't have peril in Star Wars Adventures. It doesn't mean we can't have moments, that are quite touching. But for me and my strips in it, I want there to be adventure and peril and jeopardy and all the stuff you'd expect. So that's why I'm loving working on it so much, because you can get away with that stuff in it.
So sticking to Star Wars, you have your Wild Space novel series.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's kind of it's a brother sister and their family droid are kind of stranded, and they go on their own adventures.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for that come from?
It was originally because over here in the UK we have this thing called World Book Day, which has nothing to do with the world. It just happens in the UK, and on World Book Day, kids all over the UK get a little voucher that you can hand over for books, or you can buy the entire. There's about 10 books come out on the day. You can buy the entire lot for £1 each. And usually there's one that's tied into a film or a comic or a game. And that particular year, it was just before The Force Awakens came out. The people at World Book Day wanted a Star Wars book, so they went to Egmont, who published Star Wars over here, and said, "What have you got?" And the trouble was, it was just before Force Awakens, so there was no way they could do anything with any of the characters from Force Awakens. They could have done something with like Luke or Leia or Han, but instead they decided to use it as a jumping off point to create their own little corner of the galaxy. And so Star Wars Adventures in Wild Space takes place about 16 years before A New Hope. These kids and their droid trying to find their missing parents. The parents have been kidnapped by the Empire. And the little book that came out was the sort of origin story, which then span into this series of 6 books, which I wrote with another author, Tom Huddleston. We alternate wrote the books. And yeah, it was great to have something that it started off with very few links, apparently, to the wider Star Wars world. We knew those links were coming, and by the end of it, there are links to Rebels. It's no spoiler because he's on the front cover, but Tarkin turns into be one of the big baddies at the end of the series. So yeah, it was great. I mean, that was my introduction to write in Star Wars. It was brilliant to have your own little corner that you could do with pretty much as you will. And it was great fun. Again, writing Star Wars stories featuring children, for children, because there's not that many. Because most Star Wars, when you're writing Star Wars, you're writing for, you know, characters that are teens and up. And so it was great to write something with, you know, characters the same age as the readers. And yeah, and they went down incredibly well, and they still do. And the nice thing is that because of Star Wars and the way it works, in Star Wars Adventures, we have this backup strip called Tales from Wild Space, and it's the grandson of one of the characters from the book series, who's now grown up. And so the family's become a dynasty now in Star Wars. And hopefully I'm going to go back and be able to do things with those kids, because as I say, those stories are set 16 years before A New Hope. So there's we know that they survive all the way to Force Awakens. So what have they been doing through all those years? So hopefully we're going to be able to tell those stories too.
That'd be great. Those books are, they're a lot of fun. They're something different. Obviously they're geared for a younger age, so they're very swift read for especially someone of my age.
Yeah.
And, but they don't feel like anything else that Star Wars is putting out, which is something I really liked about them. Because I like when people in the Star Wars universe are trying to do something new and different, as opposed to just telling the same Jedi versus the story over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a long time to write something in Star Wars that actually had a lightsaber in it, which was, because that's obviously what you think you're going to be doing. But it is it was nice to write something at a time where they actually think the Empire are the good guys, and then they find out very, very quickly that they're not. But that kind of thing of real people that existed in the universe who aren't particularly linked to the Rebellion or the Alliance or the Resistance, at least at first, that's interesting. And yeah, writing for children, because you don't see children very often in the Star Wars universe, because of the very nature of the stories. It was great to create something, and it was also, quite nice for a Brit working for a Brit publishers to have something created over here as well. Then we had them published about a year before or roundabouts before they were published in North America as well. It was a really good project to get involved with, and of course led to all the stuff I've been doing now for Lucasfilm, which is also great.
So now, I'll be honest with you, this is a subject I'm too knowledgeable on, but you had mentioned you had a new project you were working on. Did you want to talk a little bit about that one?
The links really to, again, most of the projects I've got at the minute seem to have the word adventures in them, but announced this last couple of weeks was Warhammer Adventures, and that's a very similar idea really. It's a series of sort of short junior novels about children in the Warhammer 40k universe. Now, if anyone does know the Warhammer 40,000 universe, it's a bleak, bleak world. It's set in the 41st millennium, where there is only war and death and destruction at every turn. And the stories are brutal. The stories are quite often hyper-violent. And a lot of kids want to read them, but they can't. So again, a group of us have got together to try and create a corner of that universe that, while without diluting what the main universe is, has adventures for kids, who are just picking up books and just starting to learn how to read adventure stories for themselves. To see people like them in this universe, which, trust me, is a dreadful place. It's a real challenge. Star Wars is actually quite a nice universe comparatively to the Warhammer universe. The fact that it's got the word war in it, well, they both do, but Warhammer is just, that puts it straight in, there's no questioning what that kind of thing's going to be about. But it's a very similar thing. It's been quite interesting. We've had a lot of reaction from some of the fandom who are worried that it's diluting what they love about about Warhammer. But again, it's that thing of actually, it's not going to change what you love. That's still existing. It's just adding something new, or seeing it through a different lens. So that's what I'm working on at the minute, alongside the Star Wars stuff. So that's quite exciting. But again, the same idea really, getting younger kids who are interested in reading, also getting them reading, because that's half of why we do these things, because they'll pick up books about Star Wars or Warhammer or Spider-Man and Batman, whereas perhaps they won't think, they won't, if people, kids who don't think books are for them, if you grab them when they have got a character or a world they love, that can really get them into reading.
Yeah, it's great that all these companies are starting to finally buy into that.
Yeah, and it does feel like finally for a lot of things. It is it's something that we are seeing more and more, which is great.
So I wanted to jump into a couple other things because you have done other stuff other than Star Wars. You've done a series of Sherlock Holmes novels. Now I'm not too familiar with these novels, to be honest with you, but I figure you give me the pitch real quick.
Yeah, so I've written two for Titan Books. Written two Sherlock Holmes novels, which are set straight in the Sherlock Holmes world, set up by Arthur Conan Doyle. The first one is when Holmes is quite old. It's called The Patchwork Devil. That one's a bit of a mashup. The picture is that Holmes and Watson find a hand on the bank of the Thames, a severed hand, which they know through fingerprinting belongs to a soldier that died on the Somme during World War I years before. But it's fresh. The hand was only severed like hours before. So there's the mystery of how on earth can a hand that was from a person killed in World War I could appear on the Thames a few years later. And that was a bit of a mashup with another fictional hero of mine. Hero is probably not the right word, but a monster created by Mary Shelley. So that will give you a clue. And then the second one's a straight Sherlock Holmes story called Cry the Innocent, when Holmes was a lot younger. For that, I brought him to my hometown of Bristol. So they were a lot of fun to read. Again, when I was growing up, Sherlock Holmes was always on telly. The films were always playing. So again, I'm working in the sandpits that I've loved all my life, which is amazing. And also there isn't much difference between writing Sherlock Holmes and Doctor Who, other than the fact there's not so many Daleks in Sherlock Holmes. The characters are very, very similar. I think a lot of the Doctor's based on Sherlock Holmes, and so it was nice to do it, sort of a tribute to those characters that I love.
So, as someone who's not familiar, other than the obvious with Sherlock Holmes, are all those books and movies connected, or is that one universe?
No, that would be chaos. It's sort of like a Holmesian 101. You've got the original canon, which is I've probably got on my shelf over there, which was Conan Doyle's original stories, short stories, and a few novels. And then as soon as he passed away, probably before, people started writing their own. And his son wrote some as well. And there is now an entire industry of people, because mainly as well, Holmes is now out of copyright pretty much everywhere in the world. I think some parts of America, there's still battles going on about some parts of Holmes. But yeah, there are so many books and pastiches. And if you love Holmes, or you're interested in Holmes, you can find Holmes teaming up with anything that is also out of copyright. So there are plenty of Sherlock Holmes meet Dracula novels and things like that. And obviously you've got all the films and the modern adaptations like Sherlock and Elementary, and then the Downey Jr. films that came out, going all the way back to the black and white Rathbone films as well, for the Universal put out. So yeah, they're not all connected. They all spring from the original stories, but no, that would drive you mad. Having continuity over things like Doctor Who is bad enough. And also, Holmes would be having an adventure every half hour, because by now he'd be shattered, because the amount of cases he has to break. I tried, when I wrote my two Sherlock Holmes novels, I tried to make them feel like they were recognisably Sherlock Holmes, and I tried not to contradict anything. I mean, but even Conan Doyle, he didn't always get his own continuity right. There are ways you can work out that Dr. Watson was either married twice or 11 times, depending on how you look at it. It's always fun to do that kind of thing. And like Star Wars and like Doctor Who, there are Sherlockians and Holmesians who spend their entire life piecing it all together and working out what could work. So I always like working in those fandoms, because they're going to be people who love what you're doing, or not, as the case may be, and get very angry about what you're doing, but they will be talking about it, and they will be trying to make it work, or disproving, or trying to prove that it couldn't work. All these things have a lot of dialogue going around them, which is great. That's
like in my world, when people start talking about if you're familiar with Legend of Zelda, timeline for that, and I've heard people explain it to me, and it's just I don't know how you came up with that, but okay.
No. Well, I worked on a book. Hang on, it's this one here. I worked on this book last year with a couple of other writers, Dalek. And the point of this book was to basically do that with the Dalek timeline from Doctor Who, because there is no continuity there. Within the series, there's about 3 origin stories. And so the task for that book, and which why it's so big, and you could really bludgeon someone to death with it, is the fact that there was 50 odd years of continuity that never really married up. And we set out, 3 of us who were working on it, to turn it into a proper history book, as if the Daleks were a real thing. And it made our brains bleed. It was, the amount of sleepless nights, and I never thought, as a 45-year-old man, I'd be sitting there wake up in the middle of the night going, but how could the Daleks be there? Or, and how could they have 3 creators? But that's also the fun of it, is that you try and make it work. And again, with Doctor Who, because it's time travel, you can get away with a lot, which is brilliant. And they have this wonderful thing called the Time War, which you can blame so many things on. And so, yeah, but that's, again, it's that, like all these things, that's half the fun. I can imagine Zelda. I know Zelda a bit, but again, I don't want to think about it too much, because I go cross-eyed. I think about how it all works.
Yeah, that's where I bring in my suspension of belief. Just, okay, that's just, it happened.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's just like, especially with something that's been going so long, and had so many different creators working on it, which is exactly what happened with Star Wars when they sort of rebooted it a few years ago, because otherwise it would have been doing new films in the old expanded universe. It would have been just the amount of hoops they would have to jump through to tell any story that a normal person off the street could understand. I just can't imagine what that would have been like. I mean, I read so many of those books when they first came out. But yeah, I mean, I was quite glad that for my children, I don't have to explain about that entire timeline. But again, then it hasn't it's still there. And my kids are still picking up Star Wars Legends comics and books and reading them. So with all these things, just because something changes, it doesn't mean it gets rid of all the other stuff and burns it. It's still there. Like, any remake of your favorite film, your favorite film is still exists. So you can choose what you want and what you don't. And growing up with Doctor Who, I think that's why I don't really worry about reboots that much, because it's a series that reboots every 3 years anyway. And it has to, for its very nature. So yeah. I always find it very fun. I find those those conversations with fans fascinating, when people get so het up about canon and continuity, and I do it as well. I mean, watching Discovery recently, I'm a man who's obsessed with very, very various universes, and I was watching Discovery getting very angry at some of the continuity with Star Trek before I realised what they were doing with it. So I do it as well, just as much as anyone else. But I think that's what being a fan is. You argue, and then you find theories of how it all works, because you like to join the dots. And writing a lot of the stuff I write means that I can do that for my job, which is brilliant. And I have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, Doctor Who was one that I never personally got into. I've tried a few times, but I thought one of the genius things they did there was the rebirths. How you could literally just redo that show every couple of years, seasons. The only problem I ever found was, aren't they getting close to like the final?
They've gone past it now. They've gone past it. They've hey, it's Time Lords. They can do anything. They gave him stroke her an entirely new regeneration cycle. So as far as we know now, there can be infinite amount of Doctors. We don't know. So yes, they've burst. But again, that's a good example of that entire 13 Lives thing was a throwaway line in one story from the mid-70s that a writer just went, oh, that'll be interesting. And then afterwards, everyone went, oh, God, that means, oh, hang on, we got to work around that. But then, so then 20, 30 years later, another writer has to try and fix it. And that, that shows, so it's a good sort of 10 years before of the series before we knew that he was only supposed to be able to regenerate a couple of, 13 times. And it was, years before we found out what planet he was from. It was years before we found out what that planet was called, because it's a growing story, and it's because it's got so many different people working on it. And that's why I think we love these things, because they don't just stay, they're not preserved in amber. They grow, they change, and half the fun is then trying to make it all link in. And there are moments when you can't, and you just have to go, oh well, and laugh about it. And that's why I think a lot of Doctor Who fans laugh a lot of the time, because they look back at old stuff and go, oh my heavens. But yeah, and there's also, you get very cross about things as well. But yeah, as I say, for me, that's the fun of it.
Yeah, that's what makes it great. I mean, recently they released the new set of Avengers comics, and Jason Aaron throws a line in there where Tony's like, yeah, you were he's sitting around with it's Tony Stark, Odinson, and Cap, and it's, you know, Thor, you've been unworthy, I've been in a coma. Cap, weren't you like the leader of Hydra or something like that? And I was like, it's been kind of a rough couple of years. Let's go be good guys again. And that's that's what makes all of this so amazing, is that we can just go off into a tangent for a minute, and then we'll come back to what it is eventually. So
yeah, I mean, I think they're always going to reset. I remember again, we're sticking with Marvel, when Joss Whedon was writing the X-Men, and there's that brilliant moment where Cyclops just turns around to Wolverine and says, "The trouble with all this leather is that people are scared of us," and Wolverine just goes, "Oh God, you're talking about spandex, aren't you?" And then there's a shot of them walking out in their, you know, like near original costumes, and you can do that kind of stuff. I mean, it's, you know, it is a bit of a wink at the fans, and yeah, I mean, I'm an old school DC and Marvel fan, you know, and a lot of the stuff I love is probably from when I really started, you know, reading it. So I got very excited with DC in Rebirth when my original Superman came back from sort of like the John Byrne Man of Steel era. Didn't mean I stopped loving Superman in between, but it just meant that it was a different, you know, continuity. But I got very excited when suddenly it was stretching back to there. So I think anytime you get into something, that's your starting point. So that's like your ground zero. And there will always be changes that you'll go, but that's not right. You know, for me, I'd still quite be happy with Spider-Man swinging around in the black costume that he picked up on Warworld, because I read those comics at the time and loved them. But yeah, I think it's that's what makes these things so exciting and interesting, because they've got so much history now that you can play with it. And I hope that never really changes. I hope that they do keep, you know, throwing stuff up in the air, because again, you know, there's going to be a reboot in a few years' time, but just go with the ride. That's how I always look at it.
As long as the stories are good.
Yeah,
that sounds like a great place to end it too. So Kevin, thanks for being on the show. And
thanks for having me.
If my viewers and listeners want to find you, where's the best place to find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Cavan Scott, and that's where I usually am when I probably should be working. And then my website is www.cavanscott.com.
All right, awesome. Yeah, once again, thanks for being on. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Dead air. Cut.
And we're back. So, yeah, Kevin was a great guy. We had a fun time scheduling because he's over in the UK. But, dude, is he written for everything? I'm not a big Doctor Who fan, but he was nuts for Doctor Who. He's written for Star Wars, for Skylanders, everything you can imagine. It's great.
I am a gigantic Doctor Who fan, and yeah, Cavan Scott rules.
Yeah, he was talking, because we started going on about the whole timeline with the Daleks, or Daleks, whatever you call them, and
they're called Daleks.
Daleks. Right? I had it right. Okay, and it just reminded me of conversations with people I know who are really into Legend of Zelda, and start talking about the whole Hyrule timeline. It's like, oh, it hurts my head to think about, but
not your particular brand of nerd.
I mean, you know, like we said, we all have our own version of that. Like, but at the same, yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I used to pride myself if I saw somebody cosplaying, I'd pretty much be able to identify what they're cosplaying as. Now, no way. 30% of the time, there's just too much video game content out there, and too much. I sit there at cons and I'm just like, don't know. It's like need it, got it kind of baseball card thing. Yeah. So just watch people come through like, no idea what that is. Looks awesome though. They worked really hard on that costume. Don't know what they are.
So we can do something we normally don't do. We got some video game news. So E3 is getting close. So stuff's getting announced, stuff's getting leaked, and there's some video game or some comic book video game stuff that relates to what we do here. So first of all, Marvel just announced their new like mobile app they're doing, which is called Marvel Battle Lines. And I'm really interested because they said it's their answer to Hearthstone. And I love card games. I grew up with Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and stuff. So this really piques my interest. I don't know about you.
Not so much. I have never in my life done anything Hearthstone or anything like that related. Again, just not my particular brand of nerd. Yep. But I will say that, like, you know, I've played a lot of the Marvel digital games that are out. The Marvel Puzzle Quest, for example, like. I play that thing every single day of my life. So they do really, really good work. They do really good jobs with these games. So I think a lot of it is just finding, it's less about chasing the Marvel brand and it's more about chasing the style of game that appeals to you. Like I like Puzzle Quest because it's basically Bejeweled with superheroes. Yep. You know, I'm into that shit. There's a ton of fighting games out that people are into. So this is going to scratch that Hearthstone-esque itch, but do it with Marvel characters. So I think that's, you know, that's going to make a lot of people really, really happy. And again, hope they have a good time with it and hope they really stick the landing with the game design.
Yeah, if done right, it's going to make them a ton of money too, because Hearthstone's just a money machine.
Yeah.
And then for the more traditional video gamer, they announced Lego DC Supervillains, which, have you played any of the Lego DC or Marvel games?
I have. I've played pretty much all the Lego Marvel games. I've played a bunch of the Lego Star Wars games. They're so much fun. They're mind-bendingly fun. And I say that as somebody, I know a lot of folks who play them with their kids. It's kind of like my nephew. It's going to be one of his big gateways into Marvel Comics. So, you know, I go over and I talk to the kid and he's really excited about Galactus out of nowhere. And I'm trying to figure out, like, where do you find Galactus here? Like, I'm thinking about all the comics that I've given him. Like, where's Galactus show up? It's from the Marvel games, the Lego games. So yeah, they're stupid fun. And I enjoy playing them as an adult. So, and they've done a really, I mean, if you think about like Lego Batman movie, like they've got this particular universe and the aesthetics for it, they've got it tied in. So this is going to be, it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I personally, when I was single, I would play them by myself all the time. I love them. They have really cool stories. They're a lot of fun. And now that I have my lady and she has two kids, it's great it's like one of those games where you can hand them controller 2 and they can play along, and they don't really impede your fun.
No, because they can just be sitting there smashing things into Lego pieces while you're running around doing whatever storyline. It's one of the best games for adults and kids to play simultaneously. Yes. It really, I mean, the only other one that I can think of that I think was close to as successful was when they were doing the Infinity, the Disney Infinity stuff with like the Marvel characters. Like that was another one, but that there is a lot of cost investment in that one. So the Legos, pretty much everything you want is right there in the sandbox.
Yeah. So yeah, this one's going to be all DC supervillains. So apparently Justice League is gone somewhere and the villains will play. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously their Joker is going to be the main character in this one, but I'm stoked to play more of those Lego games. I think they're so much fun.
I think so too. And I think it's kind of fun because they try to do such a deep bench with characters that you don't necessarily think of. So I'm just looking forward to like some of the weird, obscure characters that they'll pull out of there. Like, you know, like, are we going to see like a Rainbow Raider? Are we going to see like Gentleman Ghosts? Like just all of the really obscure, you know, pretty much everybody that you guys cover normally, through when you do your lame villain of the week. Those are the guys that I'm stoked to see in a Lego game running around.
Yeah, still champion codpiece over here. So, TT Games, get at me. And then next, Rocksteady. We've been trying to figure out what the hell Rocksteady's doing forever, and they finished their last Arkham game, or so they say. And now it's been coming out little by little that they're doing a Superman game.
That's been the rumor for a while, and if that is the case, I am 100% on board with that. That sounds so good to me. Do it like stick it in Candor, and then you can justify the map edges that Superman would otherwise blow right off of. I got to tell you, every one of the Arkham games for me was just a full immersion experience. They did such great work with those games that I'll follow those dudes pretty much anywhere. And I love, a lot of the rumor that people were branding about is, okay, well, they're going to do a Green Arrow game. They're going to do a Deathstroke game. They're going to do these games, which to me are just like, all right, well, that's just the Batman game reskinned. So for them to go the Superman route, the biggest thing I'd want to see of it that I don't know if I want to see is, a Batman game happens at night and should happen at night. I think a Superman game needs to happen during the day. I think you need to embrace the bright colors and stuff like that. And that's the one thing where I'm like, is Rocksteady going to go that route? Or is it going to look like a Zack Snyder Superman and everything's going to be kind of muted and gray a little bit? But yeah, those dudes have never failed me when it comes to game design. And I'm 100% on board for whatever they do next with DC. Yeah,
I absolutely love Rocksteady. And you just got me thinking, because I've never really seen how a Superman game can work. But then you just threw it at me and it's, Brainiac comes, puts him in Kandor, and boom, there's your story.
Boom, exactly.
And it sounds like it'll work. I hope this is it, because I want to see someone do Superman right. I want to see Superman get more spotlight, and people start to see that he's more than just this invincible character that everyone thinks he is.
I think that the Batman Arkham games took a lot of nod, not aesthetically, obviously, because they have a really specific aesthetic of their own, but they took a lot of story nod from the Batman animated series, the Dinny and Tim animated series. And if they follow that logic and go with the Superman animated series, or even the Justice League Unlimited, in terms of kind of, again, not aesthetic because they have their own thing, but in terms of just the way they treat the character and the source material, I think that would be pretty much a flawless Superman game. Stick him in Kandor so that he can't get too far off of the map. Just stick in a whole bunch of villains that are in there with him, just wreaking havoc all over Hell's Half Acre in there. So, obviously you're going to get like a Doomsday fight. You're obviously going to get like some Lex Luthor action or something like that. But, also have fun with some of the more obscure, lower tier Superman villains. So, get Toyman in there. Like I'm into it.
Or even if he just somehow you get to the storyline where Brainiac wins and he gets Metropolis and shrinks that down.
Oh yeah.
There you don't do much of explaining to how did all these villains get here. Oh, they were already in Metropolis.
I feel like you're gonna our Rocksteady seems to think a couple steps ahead. I don't know if it works that way necessarily, but at least in the Batman games, like you go through Arkham Asylum and they're seeding Arkham City. And then everything that happens in Arkham City seeds really well into the Arkham Knight. So I got to think if you're Rocksteady, you're thinking like, all right, well, what's our initial drop in here? And then once we've got proof of concept of this first game, how do we expand it? So yeah, I'm 100% on board. God, I hope it's good. I just love those games. Like the Arkham games are so much fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. If it says Rocksteady on it, I want to play it. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's talk some comics, man.
Yeah.
So you heard about this new Comixology initiative they got where they're going to start publishing their Comixology originals, as they name it?
Yeah, I did. And I think I was actually on Comixology this morning looking around, and I think it's a really smart, really exciting move. I think there's I'm not sharing any wisdom with this that everybody else doesn't know. This isn't breaking any news to anybody, but the digital comics world, I think, has an audience that's much larger than the brick and mortar store world right now for a lot of reasons. It's a different audience, and I think there's an appetite in that audience for content that really speaks directly to them. And it seems like the initial batch of Comixology originals, they're going to try to hit a lot of different genres, try to do a lot of different things there and see what really sticks. But I think it's fantastic. I'm stoked. And it just gives me somebody else to pitch to. So I'm all for that.
Well, and Comixology is great because almost anybody can post on Comixology. You got to submit and go through a whole process. Yeah. But
my stuff is up on Comixology.
Yeah, and it's because of reasons we haven't announced yet. But I've been looking into it. But it's great to see them do more to try to push up indie comics. And I know some of these books are comics that have been around for a little while. Some of them are new. A lot of these guys are big names, but it's it's an initial project, and I could see down the line where they find someone, much like Image does, that isn't as well known, and then is able to put them on the front page and say, look at this awesome book. This is a Comixology original. It's on Comixology Unlimited and all this stuff. So I'm down for it. Anything to bring spotlight to people that aren't Marvel and DC, because let's face it, they have enough spotlight.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also I think though that the world of comics is a lot bigger than Marvel and DC, and we don't necessarily notice it if we're Marvel and DC folks, but there's a lot of stuff going on out there. I think it's a smart move for Comixology. I think it's a smart move for Amazon as a whole, because they're going to get wholly original content that from creators that are going to drive people to Comixology that maybe weren't doing digital before. They're going to have access to IP all of a sudden, which is something they have not traditionally had. Traditionally, they've been basically a distribution model, but now I would have to imagine that anything that's Comixology original they probably also have a stake in that IP. So, one of these things really hits, they make a movie out of it. There you go. Just more funding for the company. But yeah, I mean, I got to be honest, I think Comixology is doing everything right now. And I think this is a great, smart move. And I think it's good for comics as a whole.
Yeah. And then also, just to throw it out there, I mean, they're owned by Amazon. So if you're a Comixology original, you think you're not going to be on the front page of Amazon at some point?
Yeah. No, and I could also see even going to like a print model with some of it where, you go through an arc or two, you get like 6 issues under your belt, and then Amazon will have trade paperback available or something like that. I would be shocked if it didn't go there, or if that wasn't something that was made available at some point. Again, it's not the best news in the world for brick and mortar. Anytime you've got something that's digital only content, especially if it's there's some digital only content which feels like it's trying to pull people into the platform, like some of the Marvel digital exclusive stuff, things like that, which, I don't know how seriously people take it if they're in the print world. But with this stuff, it's kind of like, hey, if you're into this creator and you want to see where they're going, this is the only stop for you. So I'm not educated enough in the models or in any of the retail aspect to be able to tell you like, oh, this is going to hurt retail stores, or this is going to help them. But I do think it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, it's in my eyes, it's more evolution. Like you need to evolve to what things are going on, and it's going to hurt some brick and mortar stores. But I don't know. Maybe I'm an optimistic, but I just think they'll always be around.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to hurt the brick and mortar stores any more than say the diamond ordering model.
Oh yeah, let's not get into that one.
It's a can of worms. You don't want to open up that particular can of worms. You don't have 6 or 7 hours to talk about that.
No, not on today's show.
That's fine. That's fine. Just invite me back.
Okay. So, Travis, what have you been reading any comics recently? Anything you want to talk about?
I'm a little behind, but I read Man of Steel #1. Bendis's first full length with Superman. It's the first Superman comic I've picked up in quite a while. So if DC is wondering if bringing Bendis on board would result in any additional sales, well, did from this guy. I liked it. It was a lot of fun. Bendis has a really good handle on Superman. My only issues with the book are I think they do some time jumps around that aren't necessarily the cleanest or clearest thing in the world to me. So there were points where I was kind of flipping back and forth being like, all right, wait a minute. When is this happening in relation to other stuff? There's stuff where it's very clearly distinguished, like this is now, this is then. But then even within the context of that, there's some breaks that are a little abrupt, not too organic. But I liked it, and I'm definitely interested in showing up for some more and seeing where they go with it.
I really like the whole idea, and maybe it's been done before, but I haven't read it. But the idea of the Kryptonians being kind of a threat, almost like an invading threat to the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
And I really liked that, and I really liked all the kind of the elders of the universe coming together and being like, should we do something about this? Shouldn't we? And that obviously the villain we're setting up being the one guy who was like, we need to take care of them, we need to destroy them, and jumping into it. Everything you said I agree with. Bendis he's got a great handle on it, and I think it's going to be an amazing run for him.
I'll tell you the thing I loved the most about it Well, two things. The thing you're talking about with the when Bendis is launching and they're talking initially about like, okay, well, we're going to change everything that you thought you knew about Superman. There's always that part of me that kind of winces and is like, does that have to be where we kick off every big arc? Is going back and being like, no. It turns out that like, Jor-El was a child molester and, Krypton was made out of Laffy Taffy or whatever, like whatever big change they're going to make. This one is interesting to me because I don't know that we know what we've heard about how Krypton is destroyed, but like we've never really had kind of like the point of view of somebody who was really there necessarily. So I think it's an interesting way to go and tweak the origins. My favorite part of the book was the way that Bendis treats Superman in terms of his super hearing and how he utilizes it. There's a great bit there where he's trying to listen for trouble and he ends up hearing a woman singing a song. And he just takes a minute out of his day to just sit there and really vibe on that and really enjoy that. And I've never seen that before. I've never seen that aspect of Superman's powers covered, or just being able to see him take pure joy in being Superman. Like divorce it from responsibility, divorce it from punching big robots, and just be like, here's the simplest thing. He can sit here and he can hear this beautiful thing happening that nobody else would be able to hear. I fucking loved that. And that gives me a lot of faith in where Bendis is going to go with it. It's a great character moment. Something I don't think I've ever seen before. So I'm definitely psyched for that.
And you said you hadn't been reading Superman, but I actually jumped on Superman back when Rebirth started because I really like Peter J. Tomasi's style of writing. And there was a story arc in there where when Krypton blew up, basically Jor-El survived the whole thing, and he had come to the future to have this whole back and forth of like, we need to get away from Earth. That's not good for you, because when he landed on Earth, he landed in the middle of the Middle East where it was a warring nation and people were not in that area of the best of humanity, so he had no faith in humanity, as opposed to Superman, who had plenty of faith in humanity. So I'm interested to see how that ties into what he's doing too, because not only going back to the destruction of Krypton, but I would like to see him bring in Jor-El and talk a little bit about that too, and maybe bring him into the story a little bit more.
I will say that, my experience reading Bendis stuff is that he's not necessarily always the guy that is super concerned with that level of continuity. He doesn't necessarily always go back to the previous 3 or 4 or 5 arcs and pull stuff in there. It tends to just be like he's very mission driven and very focused on the story at hand. So that also sounds interesting to me. I don't know if I would hold my breath for it though.
Anything else you've been reading recently?
Let's see. I checked this week. I read the Black Lightning Hong Kong Phooey crossover.
Oh, I got that set in my file.
Oh my god, dude! It is so completely bananas. It is like full on banoonies. It's amazing. Brian Hill is fast becoming one of my favorite writers out there, and this had such a really. It was like Big Trouble in Little China and Wu-Tang Clan and like all the great 70s like martial arts movies, and then Black Lightning is in there. Black Lightning is in there pretty much like as our point of view character. Like he's the guy who's just in there asking questions like, how does this work? And Hong Kong Phooey explaining shit to him. In a way that makes it very difficult for me to imagine Scatman Crothers' voice, coming out of this particular character. But it was a hell of a lot of fun. I will say there is a backup story to it by Jeff Parker with the Freaky Phantom, not a character I was familiar with, which is like kind of an anti-gun story. It's just a very short, like 4-page thing. And I'm about as liberal as you can possibly be. And even I was reading this going like, oh, this is going to piss some people off, dude. There's going to be some unhappy people out there. So I don't know if I can necessarily recommend the backup story, but Hill's stuff, that the Hong Kong Phooey Black Lightning stuff was amazing. And it really makes me psyched. Like I'm super excited now I've got Aquaman Jabberjaw sitting here, and I'm just like, I'm fully on board with that. So if you had told me a few years ago, like, oh yeah, they're going to cross over Batman and Elmer Fudd, and it's going to be one of the most amazing things that anybody's ever read, I'd have been like, you're on crack. That's crazy talk. But these books have been really good, like really unexpectedly good. So it's just, it's one of those things you could only do in comics. So it's been really good. A couple of the things I can plug real quick, which are on the indie side, but I'm in this period where every Kickstarter that I funded is suddenly sending me the shipments of their stuff all at once. So a Kickstarter that I backed for the Pride Adventures, which is an all LGBT superhero team. I got the hardcover collection of that, and it is awesome. And I think they're working on a new issue for that right now, so I'd keep an eye out for Pride Adventures. And then my buddy Luke Foster has a comic called Spooky Town, and I just got my backing stuff from backing his Spooky Town Kickstarter, and it's great. It's funny and smart and really cartoony and interesting. And then friend of the show, Cavan Stokes, has just finished his third issue of his Heat comic. So this is the last issue of the initial arc, I believe. And I had the great pleasure of seeing like the initial pencils that he was doing for this like 2 years ago for the first couple issues. And I'm psyched. He's an awesome dude. And it's been good to see him, continue to push forward with this project. So that's what I had this week. How about you?
I had a lot of stuff. So buckle in.
All right.
So I'll start with Lando, Double or Nothing. So this is taking place before the events of Solo. And this is Lando's trying to figure out a way to turn the Millennium Falcon into a casino. And then along the way, someone comes along, is like, we need your help, we'll pay you, this and that. And it's very much the Lando you got from that movie. It's one of those comics that's going to set up where Lando is before the movie, and then when we're over, he'll probably end up being in that cantina that we met him in. I really enjoyed it. I think Rodney Barnes is the writer. He did some... what was he... He's known for some Black Panther and I believe Falcon stuff. And he's a great writer. He doesn't get enough credit for what he does, and I really enjoyed the issue. If you like Star Wars, it's another one of those Marvel Star Wars books that has just been killing it recently.
And the Marvel Star Wars books have been crushing it. I really loved the last Lando series that they did. Yes. Charles Soule writing it. Such a great book. And this was one this is actually on my pile. So I'm excited to see it because I literally just saw Solo yesterday and had such a great time with the movie and with Lando's character, Donald Glover, crushing it. So I'm really, this will be fun to see a little bit more of that character there.
Yeah. And then I got Marvel 2-in-1, and this is issue 6. If you're not reading Marvel 2-in-1, like, it's the best kept secret right now in Marvel. Chip Zdarsky is writing it, and it's the first book I've read by him that isn't comedically driven. And we're in like an alternate universe where, so Thing and Torch are trying to find Reed and Sue. So this is obviously going to be leading up to the Fantastic Four book they announced. And they end up in this alternate universe where instead of the Fantastic Four beating Galactus, in the process, Ben Grimm dies, and Doom swoops in and defeats Galactus. And by defeating Galactus, he turns into Galactus. So now our Thing and Johnny Storm have to team up with this universe's heroes to defeat a Doctor Doom who has the powers of Galactus and has many minions or heralds that are Doombots. Jim Chung is doing the art on it, and he is one of the best out there. He's going to be doing the first issue of Justice League next week too. So it looks pretty, and it's a great story. Saga 52, honestly, kind of a non-issue. It's just they're kind of dragging on to this whole the robot and his girlfriend are going to turn into. They told their story, and now they're going to turn into these different people so that they can kind of hide away. And they're waiting for this magic to come and to help them. And through the process, Sir Robot's son runs away and runs into the will. And there's a whole story there. this has been the first issue in a while that's been kind of like filler, so to speak. But Saga's still been really good, and there's lots of Gus in this book, so I love that character so much.
Yes, and the thing to remember about Saga, like a lot of Brian Vaughan books, is I tend to read Saga in trade or in collection, so I never really have the problem with those filler issues. And the thing to remember is always just that those filler issues inevitably seed stuff that will pay off huge dividends later on. Yeah. It's just laying groundwork for something that is going to later on you'll see the culmination of it, and it'll be absolutely kind of phenomenal. But you have to like kind of give them the runway to get there, which is sometimes the difficulty with reading monthly on a book like that. Anytime Gus is on the panel, I will jump right in.
Oh yeah, when they announced the plush Gus, I immediately ordered it. But it's Walking Dead is a similar problem where, and I'm going to say problem, but it's not really a problem, where you have dips in the story, but you need them in order to get back up. So I'm not trying to say it's a bad issue or anything like that. It felt like they were kind of trying to get to a place, and this is just another step along the way.
Yeah. And at least, I mean, I will say that the problem with Walking Dead is when they have those issues, as much as I love the art on that book, it's still essentially just going to be a lot of, people talking.
Yeah.
Whereas when you've got an issue of Saga that gets in there, like at least it's got the benefit of having the, Fiona Staples' insanely amazing, weird space sci-fi fantasy graphics going on around it. So it still looks like an acid trip, even if it's just, a book full of talking heads.
Yeah, she's someone that does drama so well. Like, I don't know if you read her and Mark Waid's initial run on Archie. But goddamn, I have never read Archie in my life. Like, and this just enthralled me from issue 1, mostly because of her art. But to have Mark Waid writing it didn't hurt either.
You know what though? I don't care who's writing it. I will queue up for her art. She is the goods. And also, like, I met her at New York Comic Con a couple years ago with Brian, and just so freaking nice, so cool. Yeah. She is amazing.
And then I got a book that just returned, The Realm, issue 6. Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite books that comes out right now, and I wish it came out on a more regular basis. But the idea is that the end of the world happens, much like The Walking Dead, but instead of zombies, a game of D&D just broke out. Goblins appear, orcs appear, dragons appear. We're in a fantasy world, but all these characters were in our time. So it's an adventure story where they're trying to get someone from one place to another. We've got the character who they even make a reference to Boba Fett in this because he just wears a mask and has a crossbow, and he's just a badass that doesn't talk. Who was it? Jeremy Hunt and Seth Peck. They write the fuck out of this book. I absolutely love everything about it. They get into fantasy tropes, but they put it in a post-apocalyptic manner. Where in this one, they come across an orc who has a group of humans, and they've cut off this bridge, so you can't get past them unless you pay the toll. But the way that they take care of it is amazing. So if you're not reading The Realm, I really recommend The Realm. It's great.
You had me when you said D&D. You had me right there. I'm in.
Yeah. And then, let's see, we got Justice League No Justice, number 4. It just wrapped up the weekly series. Like I said, next week we're getting Justice League number 1, so it sets everything up for that. It was a fun ride, although I think the story deserved more than 4 issues. It felt like they built up, and then just had to wrap up real quick. But it did kind of set all the pieces where they need to be for the next set of Justice League books. Now, was it you on this show a few months back that we talked about Punisher and Frankencastle?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
So, I had mentioned to you that the new Punisher run's a lot of fun, so I do have Punisher.
It's so much fun.
I have Punisher 225, and it's all the heroes in New York. Basically, all the B-list heroes have seen Punishers come back to the States, and they're like, we need you to stop using the War Machine armor because our friend died and he was War Machine and you're sullying his name. So it's just him killing a bunch of people and fighting a bunch of heroes. I absolutely love it.
Anytime you can get the Punisher out of that standard, like shooting gangsters and drug dealers comfort zone and do something kind of outside the box, it's a good time. And this has been a really good run. I checked it out based on your recommendation, especially, and I really have been having fun with it. So I have not read the most recent issue; it's sitting on my pile, but I'm there for it.
And another thing they do in this issue, and they did it in the first issue of Avengers that Jason Aaron took over, is they really start talking about the events of Secret Empire, where they kind of are like, listen, nobody cared. You were killing muggers and rapists, and we were all kind of like, okay, he's doing his thing. But dude, you sided with Hydra, and that's fucked up. And
it's the Marvel Universe equivalent of like, dude, how could you vote for Trump? Like, that's basically what it is.
A little bit.
And no, it absolutely is. If you think about who wrote Secret Empire, and that's exactly what it is.
So it's just interesting to see these heroes and the writers that are writing these heroes kind of talk a little bit more about that whole thing, that we're not just ignoring that Cap was kind of like leading the Nazis for a little while.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's nice when the big crossover still resonates and pays dividends down the road, where you're not just like, it's over, we're never going to speak about that again. Like, it's nice when that stuff, and it happens every once in a while where you come out of the crossover and you're just like, all right, now, but what? Like, where did it really leave us?
And then I got Doomsday Clock number 5. So this book it's going to read much better in trade. I'm actually kind of at the point where I want to just save it and read it all as one giant thing, because it's very slow and methodical.
Yeah,
and so we get into this whole thing where the Russians have decided that they don't want American superheroes in Russia anymore. So Russia has its own group of heroes, and then they're accusing the American government of manufacturing their heroes, and it's this whole political intrigue that gets a little daunting after a while, but I had to reread it a couple times to kind of get through it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in these books. It's a little bananas, but it's such a ballsy concept to mix the Watchmen characters and the DC characters that I'm interested in seeing kind of how it goes, how it pays off.
And then we get some kind of parallels to the original Watchmen series where people start protesting, and the characters from the Watchmen universe, the two I absolutely love, the two villains that came over, I'm forgetting their name now, but they're with Batman, and there's these protesters, and they kind of throw Batman down, and he swings over them and sees that they're protesting against Batman, which is a strange visual for me personally.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, if you were really a real person living in Gotham City, Batman would be goddamn insane. It would be like, for the average person, like, you would not be like, yay, Batman. You would just be like, this is terrifying that there's this insane person dressed up like a bat who just beats the shit out of people every night. You know what I mean? Like as comic book readers, we look and we're like, yeah, he's a good guy. But if you were an average person, like if you knew right now that there was somebody in your town who just every night was out in a costume beating the shit out of people, that person would be like a nightmare. So I'm into it.
And then we get this side story with this older gentleman.
I got to plug in my laptop real quick, so just cut away from me.
Okay. So we get this side story with this older gentleman who's trying to find the Green Lantern, and he's old enough where I think he's supposed to be a Golden Age hero, but I can't tell. And then it ends with Joker and Rorschach standing across from each other talking, and I am so intrigued of what this has coming. Once again, I just think it's one of those books where I have to go back and read the whole thing over again. Barrier. Are you reading Barrier?
I've not heard of Barrier. Tell me about Barrier.
Barrier is Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin, and it's one of their panel syndicate books. And I lost my camera. There it is. So it's one of their panel syndicate books, and it's very interesting because the first issue, half of it's in English, half of it's in Spanish. You meet a woman that's from Texas, and she's a cattle rancher, and she's trying to get by. And then you meet a man who's from Mexico and is trying to jump the border and get to America. And it gets to a point where I sat there and was like, I see what you're doing, and this isn't something I want to read, blah, blah. And then fucking aliens appear.
Oh, shit.
And then they're trapped on this alien spaceship, and they have to find a way to communicate and get together. And it's a whole story about two people who don't speak the same language, trying to come together and survive. And it's such a sweet and touching story that I think people should just give a chance. It's just done so well, and the art is fantastic in it, and they're very quick reads too. So this is the last issue. I think he said he wasn't going to print it anymore after this, but you know how that goes in comics. But if you want to check it out, his the website panelsyndicate.com, you can check it out, and it's one of those services where you pay what you want for it, and you get the whole thing.
Cool. No, I'll definitely check that out. That's one that's completely slipped my radar, and I'm a huge Vaughn fan, so I feel like I've been slacking, and I need to get off my ass.
You read Private Eye from Panel Syndicate, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And it was amazing.
Yeah. So similar idea, similar kind of style too, where the book is actually, when you read it in print, you're reading it like that as opposed to like that.
Oh, right on.
You know what I mean? So my last book is Kill or Be Killed, number 19. Basically anything Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, I'm reading. I love that team. Yeah. And it's funny because you were talking about the whole Batman thing. We were talking about Doomsday Clock. And that's what this book is. It's a vigilante who goes out and he starts killing people, and people are freaking out about it. Even though all he's killing, he kills a child rapist, he kills Russian mafia members and everything. But we're near the end of the story in this part, and the lead character has been in the loony bin for a little bit, and he's trying to kind of skate by and is realizing that since the person who was mimicking him while he was in the loony bin was killed, everybody thinks the vigilante is taken care of. So he's like, I can go on with my life and live my life and be fine, and nobody will be the wiser. Except there's always that cop that knows that something's wrong, right? And she finds out. And a bunch of events occur from there, and it ends in a certain way that I don't want to spoil for anybody. But the next issue is going to be the last issue, so I'm sure soon we're going to have a big trade for this. Kill or Be Killed has been really great, and I definitely recommend checking it out.
Like you said, everything that Brubaker and Phillips do together is gold. Those guys are a can't-miss team. I've got one more, actually, and I have not read it yet, so I can't speak super intelligently about it, but I do want to shout out Amazing Spider-Man 800.
Oh, okay.
Because it is the last issue for Dan Slott, and it appears that it is the last thing in comics that Stuart Immonen is ever going to draw. So I have not read it yet, but I will say that Slott's Spider-Man run, I think, has been pretty much all killer, no filler. He's had some absolutely out there ideas, like really, really cool stuff. The Spider Island, the Spider-Verse, like he's done so many really rad things since taking over this book. And I just got to give it up to him for having such an unprecedented, unparalleled run on the character. I'm going to miss him a lot on this book. And Immonen is that guy's art is so amazing. I keyed in on him during Next Wave, and ever since then I've been just a gigantic fan. And it's really great that he's going to be retiring. I'm glad he gets to do that, but it's comics' loss. So definitely you should check out that book.
Yeah, that's one of those runs where I want to go back and read a little bit before. Was it 700 where Doc Ock dies and they switch bodies?
You can even go a little bit further than that with, I think right around the Brand New Day is kind of where Slott's stuff really kicks in, or Big Time, I think, is Slott's first big run in there, which is kind of sets up some of the conceits that pay off when that Superior Spider-Man arc kicks in, which again, how did he manage to pull that off? But he did, completely crushed it. I don't think Dan Slott gets anywhere near the love that he should be getting. His stuff, he's never going to be like the Alan Moore. He's never going to be like the Grant Morrison guy. He's never going to be the guy who's like the literary comics poster child. But his stuff is always really fun, really high energy, really funny, and really thought out with a lot of heart. And I think you can't ask for more than that in comics.
He's an important guy for Marvel because I've heard quite a few interviews with him. And he's one of those guys that just knows his Marvel history like no one else.
Oh, yeah.
You need guys like that to kind of hold the fort down. Like, Mark Waid was that for DC for a long time, and now they've got Jeff Johns doing it.
Yep.
But that's what Dan Slott does. He just doesn't get the credit that Jeff Johns does. And I'm really excited for him to move on to Fantastic Four. Like, him and Sarah Pichelli, I am so down.
Oh my God, yes. Two amazing flavors that you're going to put them together. That's going to be some fantastic comics, man. I'm looking forward to his Fantastic Four run. But like I said, I'm genuinely saddened to see him leaving Spider-Man because it's a very good meld of writer and character. And it's been so. Not that I'm expecting Dan Slott to see this, but thank you, Dan Slott.
Yes, and dude, for me, I read the Free Comic Book Day issue of Amazing Spider-Man #1, and obviously I'm a huge Ryan Ottley fan, and I like Nick Spencer more when he does the kind of not so serious stuff, even though I do enjoy Secret Empire at the same time. But I'm super excited for him to take over as well. I just kind of wish it was a Chip Zdarsky situation where he could be like the spectacular Spider-Man, but still.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, that I think that in my opinion, some of Nick's best non-creator-owned work has been Superior Foes of Spider-Man. So clearly it's a world that he knows and a world that he does well in. So I've got great faith in what he's going to bring to the table there. And when Spider-Man becomes head of Hydra, it's going to be a really... No, I'm just kidding. I'm just fucking around. It should be really good. I think it's well in tune to what he can do well.
No, the listeners are sick of me talking about Secret Empire, so they don't want that to happen. But so, Travis, thanks again for being on the show. It's been amazing.
Hey.
We could talk forever.
Yes, we could. And have before.
Yes. So, if the listeners want to find you, where can they find you, man?
So let's see. They can find me on Twitter at Travis Holyfield. They can find me... you know what? That's probably the best place. I've also got a website, which is www.travismholyfield.com, or you can go to streetclothescomic.com, which will bring you to the same place. The second issue of Street Clothes is complete, and the 2nd through 5th issues should be dropping probably August, I think. We'll have physical copies available, and they should be on Comixology shortly thereafter. Just follow me on Twitter, Travis Holyfield. Good times.
Awesome. I get more Street Clothes soon.
Yeah.
So everybody, you can follow me at Fortress Chris on Twitter, and the show FCN_official on Twitter. And it's always, FortressComicNews.com. If you're watching us on YouTube, you know the drill. Thumbs up, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. iTunes, we still need more reviews, so please, if you're listening to us on iTunes, leave reviews. We super appreciate everything you guys do for us. And thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for having me here today, man. I had a good time.
Yep. We're going to zoom in on your face instead of Mike's today.